He's a world-class veterinarian who made a big name in the horse community for getting animals healthy. But federal law enforcement say this man had a dark side, an alleged twisted relationship with a 15-year-old girl, and when confronted about it by the girl's mom, you will not believe what he allegedly told her, including that her teen daughter was reportedly his soulmate, and allegedly that he paid someone from the CIA to, quote, long rifle a bullet into your chest. And that's not all. Let's unpack it. We're on the case, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. You never know what someone's like behind closed doors and away from the spotlight. There's a lot of stories that we cover that are evidence of that. But this one, in a lot of ways, is on a different level, especially when it comes allegedly to the gaslighting that the suspect does in this case to the victim's mom. And frankly, gaslighting is putting it lightly when I show you the text messages that Greg Ford allegedly sent the mom of the teenage girl in this story. Now, before we get to those text messages, as well as a very, very disturbing voicemail, we'll say that Greg Ford sent the teen victim in this case before he was arrested. Let's talk a little bit about who this suspect is. He is someone who is a big name in the horse community. His name is Greg Ford. He's a veterinarian. He travels the country going to farms to help horses get healthy. And on his Facebook page, he advertises himself as someone who is ready to travel. According to the FBI, he spent time in Texas, where he's based, Georgia, Florida, Tennessee, Missouri, Alabama, and Mississippi. He is based in the Houston area. Now, we found several people on Facebook, though, really happy with the work he did as a vet, thanking him for helping their horses. But then in August of this year, the reality of what people thought they knew about Dr. Ford was shattered. According to federal court documents, on August 22nd, a mom came to the sheriff's office in Lauderdale County, Alabama, which is along the Tennessee border, because her daughter, who had worked for Ford, had some very disturbing text messages, she says, on her phone. Now, the day prior, she said that she was looking through her daughter's phone and she found alleged explicit text messages between her 15-year-old daughter and Ford, who's in his 50s. Now, the two were allegedly talking about having sex. When law enforcement interviewed the teenager, she told them that Ford had sex with her as many as 4 times, and also the two had sent nude photos back and forth to each other when Ford was traveling on the road. Not only do the text messages and a witness build a pretty strong case against Ford, it would seem, when he apparently found out that he was going to be facing charges for this, and that the mom of the girl he was allegedly sexually abusing was the one who came forward, he went right at her. Now, not only did Ford allegedly text the mom a long message that included the line that he said, quote, that he had already paid a dear friend from the CIA to long rifle a bullet in your chest, end quote. He also reportedly went on to say, quote, you sure have made a mess of things, that's for sure. A little dialogue or correspondence may have helped, but your obsessive compulsive nature guides your path, and you've been like this your whole life. A tiger's stripes can never be changed. Truly, there is nothing stronger than a mother's love for her daughter, and yet there were so many different ways to go about this, but in the end, you failed. Now, it's unclear how the mom and Ford knew each other, but Ford reportedly went on, quote, so listen, instead of being your dramatic, stubborn, and overbearing self, I actually imagine you are sending this text right now to the cops, and in parentheses he says, I really couldn't bleeping care at this stage. Instead, go be with your daughter and hold her and listen to her words. Now, he's not done. He not only goes on to say, bleep you, multiple times in this text message to the mom. And again, this is a 52-year-old man talking to the mom of a 15-year-old girl he is allegedly sexually abusing. We put Greg Ford's name into truthfinder.com, and it came back showing that he really doesn't have much of a criminal record, couple traffic infractions, but nothing compared to what he is facing right now. Here at Law&Crime, we use Truthfinder to help us learn more information about the people involved in our stories. But even if you don't work in true crime, this can be an excellent resource to give you some pieces peace of mind because it's one of the largest public record search services in the United States. And with the paid subscription service, you get access to unlimited reports about almost anyone. And right now, you can get 50% off your first month of confidential background reports. Just go to truthfinder.com/OTC. Here's what he says next. Quote, listen to your daughter and our love story. She is my soulmate. We weren't lying. You just hated the truth. When the dust settles and your witch hunt ends, you dig deeper into Pandora's box that you opened, you will find that you truly should have done it differently. The truth will come out. Now, this message was allegedly sent on September 23rd, more than a month after the victim's mom went to the local authorities in Alabama after finding those text messages allegedly from Ford to her 15-year-old daughter. On the same day in September that Ford allegedly sent a threatening letter to the mom of the victim, he also left a voicemail to the victim, and apparently the FBI has that as well. It reads in part, quote, hey baby, few more minutes left on Earth, and the most important things was for me to get this message to you. Thank you, baby. Thank you so much. You're the greatest blessing God has ever given to me. I dated, I married, and I never knew true love and how special a heart could be until I met yours. I'm sure that sounds crazy right now, but I got your incredible love for the past year. You're beyond perfect. If they only knew that it had nothing to do with sexuality. Now, just a reminder, before I continue on with this, remember, this is a 52-year-old man allegedly leaving a message for a 15-year-old girl. Now, police claim he also says, quote, I wish your family knew your true heart, your dreams of dating, sleeping and marrying just one person, and raising two babies that never sought anger and only love. And he reportedly finishes with, quote, no one can take away our love. Please be strong, baby, and tell our love story. You promised to write a book about it. I told you that. Mi amor, please tell our story. With all the hurt and losing everything, just so you know, I would do this over again 100 million times. Without questions, the love shared for the last year has been the best year of my life. I love you, baby. They'll find me in your favorite place, the place of our dreams. Please remember the code word. Now, it's unclear what he meant by the code word, but the next day, Ford was arrested while in Marion County, Florida. He's still being held in the Marion County jail without bond. A charge is listed as sexual assault on a victim under the age of 17. Federal authorities have said that they're concerned there could be more alleged victims of Ford because of just how often he was on the road across multiple states. Join us now as victims' rights attorney John Phillips. Always great to have you on Law and Crime. I know the suspect in this case, he's in Florida. Involving minor victim one is out of Alabama. I know those are two places that you know well and how the law works, but this looks like a federal case, which we'll talk about in just a moment. But just as we kind of unpack what you read in those court documents, whether it's the text message to the mom or the voicemail that he leaves to this 15-year-old before he gets arrested, allegedly, just what do you make of that?
There's so much to unpack. And you know, as usual, Law and Crime is usually ahead of me with knowing the facts. But, you know, it's awful, first of all. You've got a 50-something-year-old man and a young teenager and a relationship with a guy that travels from state to state. You know, I'm licensed in 8 states. I don't travel nearly as much, but he's got this, you know, horse racing veterinarian business. And, you know, your heart goes out for that victim and other victims because you can presuppose based upon what he said in, you know, messages and what he's left on voicemails that there's evidence here. You know, there's not just smoke, there's fire.
Well, and I think too, if you were his defense attorney, and this is someone who even, whether it's the text to the mom where he says, you're probably sending this to the cops right now, and then to the 15-year-old victim, he allegedly says something along the lines of like, I'm about to go away and I would do it over 1,000,000 times, you know, and it's just, what does his defense look like going forward? And it is important to note that there could be more charges coming.
Correct. You know, with this particular victim, you know, and some of the it's charged federal, but each state where there was an illegal contact with this minor, there could be overlapping or concurrent state charges. Because it's charged federal doesn't erase the fact that he would face state criminal liability, civil liability as well. But yeah, it's from the criminal defense perspective, I'll start there. That was where your question started. You got to challenge the chain of evidence, right? First of all, well, they shouldn't have ever gotten this. I see in the affidavit, it starts off, or the complaint, it starts, talking about the Bill of Rights and the Fourth Amendment and the chain of custody. And so, the federal prosecutors know what they're doing. They get a, 90 plus, 95, 98% conviction rate for a reason. Then you got to try to figure out, okay, well, let's see if it's a valid seizure of this evidence, then what can I say? It's hearsay? Well, no, it's statement against interest for sure. Maybe it was entrapment. Nope, not entrapment. So you try to tick off all the things that a good criminal defense lawyer would say to put these statements back in the bag, and they don't go back in the bag. And they're very, very incriminating.
Yeah, and I think too, of other charges that could come, and just from what I've seen in other cases, if he sent explicit photographs and received explicit photographs from a minor who's in another state while he's traveling, that would be a federal crime, right? On top of what he's already facing. And then even the threat that he made to the mom, allegedly, if that was in another state, because typically, just so people know, like when it comes to federal charges, the crossing state lines part is critical when it comes to whether the FBI is getting involved.
Correct. Yeah. You need a level of two states. If you think of it like this, so certainly, if you commit a crime in one state, that state has jurisdiction. But when it's commingled, and Joe Exotic was kind of the perfect example and was one of my clients. The reason Joe's became federal is because they were, there was sending somebody into Texas to get an ID, and, it crossed somehow into Florida if the hitman was going there. And so the Fed has jurisdiction over the whole country. And so the FBI and investigators can go wherever they need to go. They can follow the investigation. And that doesn't take away the possibility of state crimes, but at some point, most of my clients would much rather face a singular state prosecution than a robust federal prosecution. And here it's, your readers are probably, used to kind of the crime board with string, like they've got it, going across all different states, because this guy's, main occupation was traveling from, major horse event to horse event to be the veterinarian. And, the thing I know we're going to get into is this victim was named Victim 1.
Yeah.
And so, the feds tend to do things with purpose, and one would assume if there's a 1, there might be a 2 or a 3. Otherwise, they just say minor victim.
Well, because and that's an interesting point, because when it ends the news release, even that I think the Marion County Sheriff put out, they said there could be more victims. And I feel like when you make a decision that you're going to put that in a press release, and obviously he hasn't been accused of anything more than what he has, but right. It seems like it's insinuating that there could be something more going on. And then to your point, to see minor victim 1. How does the legal system, knowing that you have this case now, you have a 15-year-old victim, and she deserves justice if all is true, which is written in these court documents we have, but then there could be more victims and then more state charges. Like, how does the legal system handle this case, making sure that she can get swift justice, but then at the same time that, you could be charging this guy forever if more things keep coming up?
Right. The rising tide in these cases kind of raises all ships. It protects all victims. It's in a civil case, right? If you're suing for monetary damages, you may only want one victim, right? There's one insurance policy. If other victims come aboard, you might be cutting that pie into smaller pieces. But jail time is unlimited, right? And oftentimes prosecutors put that in a press release as an invitation. Do you know something about this, just as an independent witness, or are you a parent that has this concern with this individual? And every interview that's done is a sounding board of victims' rights, right? So we've had it with church abuse cases, with pediatric dental abuse cases. We've had multiple types of cases where the press release immediately gets other phone calls and other information. And I think, when you have people who engage in predatory behavior of minors, they tend not to do this once and only once. It's a immoral quality that's in the fiber of their being, and in somebody that has the resources and the travel schedule of this individual, it becomes a grave concern.
Really does. And I think too of, you've had previous cases where, this is someone who, there's really no, I guess, profile of what a predator looks like. We've seen so many cases involving people that you would never expect. And then in this case, just from looking at his social media, I saw that, it's a lot of kids' horses who he's working with. Young people, he seems to be around a lot. And I think back to Jerry Sandusky, very different situation, but this was a guy who was running a charity for children who you never would expect as the person to be around. I guess, just in your experience, working in victims' rights, when it's someone who, do you ever get shocked now at this point when you see the profile of someone, and it is in this case, someone who he's got great reviews online as a horse veterinarian. I can see why people would hire him for that, but then you look at that profile, and then we're reading this text message and then what he said to the mom as well, allegedly, and it's a completely different person.
I still get shocked every day, and not every day because I don't get new cases every day, but, consistently, being a lawyer that comments on horribles and accepts horribles as a living, my law partner does family law for a living. That's all he does. And we sometimes compare notes about his role as a lawyer that handles divorce and child custody. So we always compare kind of the horribles of it that he does family law and I do, oftentimes wrongful death of children. And neither one of us can accept being the advocate in the other one's shoes. And the worst cases that I deal with are also some of the most rewarding at the end, because you deal with people, and again, innocent until proven guilty here, but in other cases, when they're proven guilty, and the child receives justice, it is more rewarding, and the more horrible the situation, the kind of and to allow people to learn from it and realize that that everywhere, anybody around you, and your children, let's not get crazy paranoid here, but let's also do due diligence. Let's pay attention. Because sadly, we're in a world where, evil is around us.
It is. And we cover it every single day. And it's always it's people, the teachers, I think of, we've had a ton of stories like that. And then even in this case, here's someone who had a position of power, and the alleged victim, victim one in this case, had worked for him. And then you just wonder, what the investigation will look like going forward. Knowing that this allegedly happened in Alabama, he was arrested in Florida. You have the FBI that's involved. If he is convicted, where does he spend his sentence?
So even no matter what, so the Fed can use any of their prisons. So like Joe Exotic was convicted in Oklahoma, and at times he's served in Texas, at times he's served in North Carolina, depending upon his health, right? So, in this case, it would probably be a more maximum security prison. And so they would look at their list, they would kind of figure out what fits this profile. This wouldn't be a club fed kind of prison, I would assume, where it's more dorm room style. This would be more maximum security because of the nature of the allegations and horribles. And certainly the more victims, the more they honestly need to protect, this inmate, assuming conviction, from other inmates.
Yeah. And knowing that you practice in Alabama as well, which is where this allegedly took place, if this was a case that didn't have the federal aspect to it, how would the punishment in Alabama and how the state goes about prosecuting these cases compare to what a defendant like this, Gregory Ford, could face in a federal court system?
Yeah, I mean, this is a life to death case, potentially. I don't know enough of the facts, and certainly understand there was a desire at a point for a minor to give consent, even though they cannot, but it depends on, because there is apparently some reference to the fact that sexual acts were completed, and if sexual acts were completed in Alabama, from the Alabama sentencing standpoint, it's a life or death case. But it's kind of early to tell where this falls on a sentencing range, but it could get to that point.
And this is probably getting ahead of ourselves, but I always think of in some of these cases where you see, I guess the term is gaslighting, which is a lot of what he's doing here, or saying that, the victim wanted to do it with him as well. And clearly this is a 52-year-old man allegedly talking about a 15-year-old girl. But if you have a client who then, through the process of the court system, decides to take the approach of, I'm so sorry, I was in the wrong state of mind. Knowing that they have these text messages, they have this voicemail, does any sort of apology or, trying to find some sort of plea deal down, do these text messages, no matter what, that is going to come back to haunt him during the court proceedings?
Yeah, that is certainly going to be his albatross. There's no way you're going to get that from around his neck. Prosecutors and federal judges, certainly for the standpoint of sentencing, I just handled one recently, want people to confess and want people to not only confess, but help expose other crimes. We're way early in this thing.
Sure.
But was he in a ring? Are there other people that he knows that does the same thing? Is he a part of a group text or whatever that is that depraved? One would hope not. But certainly participating with the FBI and helping resolve other crimes, and/or opening yourself up to other victims. There could be a meeting where they say, all right, we'll give you life without parole or 50 years or whatever. At 52, you get to the point where 30, 40 years is a life sentence. But we'll give you X, but we want to know every single victim. And then you still have the consequence of possible state charges. So, the law tends to get complicated, but there are certainly opportunities within the federal system to do right and to get credit for doing right. But like you said, he's kind of caught himself with these messages and admissions and assuming they have a victim that stays healthy, right? Like the mental health of that victim is not only extremely important for the justice system, but most important for that victim. She is the victim of a crime. She will never be the same, ever, ever. And so, that's why it's important to protect these victims. They're groomed, they're manipulated. You can see through the messages, he's an extreme narcissist who uses gaslighting, uses deflection, uses extortion. This is the type of people that hopefully, if guilty, that the law makes an example of.
And we'll see how this all plays out. Very early, but certainly shocking just reading through those court records. John Phillips, always great to have you on Law and Crime. Thanks for being with me.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Ford is being held without bond. That will do it for On the Case, presented by Law and Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify. I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.